Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. It is a great pleasure to warmly welcome you to this 5th online engagement session of the Transboundary Freshwater Security Water Governance Training. My name is Yumiko Yasuda. I'm the Senior Transboundary Water Cooperation Specialist at the Global Water Partnership and the lead faculty of the massive open online course on governance for transboundary freshwater security, which was developed by GWP and GEF IWLM, along with many global partners and experts from the field of transboundary water. Since opening of this course in August 2020, the MOOC has attracted over 2,000 participants from 150 countries around the world, confirming the need and interest for learning about this subject. The course is available for anyone to take at their own pace. In order to enhance the learning experience and to provide opportunity for people to engage and interact with experts in the field, GWP and the Wuhan International Water Law Academy worked together to create an online event series called Transboundary Freshwater Security Governance Training. In this series of events, we will be highlighting not only the key topics of transboundary freshwater governance, but also highlight various examples and expertise from different geographic locations around the globe, as if the train is stopping at the various locations in the world. Together with Wuhan International Water Law Academy, we are planning 6 online sessions specifically focusing on topic of international water law. Today is the 5th session of this series, and the topic is on infrastructure and international water law. Today's session has 2 main parts. The first part is a panel discussion by distinguished speakers where they will be sharing their experiences on the topic and answering your questions. The second part is the breakout session where you will all have opportunities to interact with experts. We have a great lineup of session chairs and speakers for the next 1.5 hours. And today, our transboundary freshwater governance train will be stopping at Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Europe, welcoming speakers from all of these regions. We have some housekeeping rules for today's event. The online session will be recorded, so people who couldn't join due to other commitments or the time zone will be able to view the discussions later on. Please always mute your audio when the moderator or speakers are presenting. You can unmute your audio or will be invited to unmute your audio by the moderator when the chairs are requested to speak, or also in the breakout sessions. The event will not only present a new knowledge, but we welcome your input in interactive parts. So please, we count on you to present throughout the whole session. So please stay throughout the session. Today's session is designed to be as interactive as possible for you to be able to ask questions to experts and also provide your thoughts and feedback to the subject. We'll be using the Pulp as the main interactive tool, particularly during the first part of the session. Some of you have already used this Pulp while waiting for this event to start. So let's start this first Pulp question, where you are joining from. So for this, please join in by typing this address to your computer or your mobile phone browser, polleave.com/GWP. polleave.com/GWP. You can also see this address link in the chat. My colleague has typed into the chat. In this map, please tell us where you're joining from. Now I see a lot of people now joining, a lot of dots coming. A lot of dots in Europe, Africa, I see. I see a lot of dots in Asia, in China, as far as Japan even, Indonesia, so many places here. I see Cambodia, Thailand, and then I also see dots from South America here, Brazil. It must be very, very early hours for you. So thank you so much for joining us in today's session. And I also see the numbers keep increasing. Yes, thank you from China, colleagues from China, for commenting on the chat. So very, very welcome. And we are very happy to welcome all of you from all over the world. Now let's go to the next poll if questions. So what kind of infrastructure are related to transboundary water resources? This is an open question. So today's topic is on infrastructure and international water law. So trying to get some understanding on what do you think are the key infrastructure related transboundary water resources? Yes, hydropower, the dams. Thank you for that. Yes, another response on dams. Dams, barrages, wires. Oromia regional state, Africa, okay. Dams, everybody seems to be, majority seems to think dams are the key resources. Yes, there's bridges, water diversion schemes, gas extraction plant, that's very interesting. Yes, barrages, dams, canals, hydropower barrages. Urban planning, yes, that's also very much related to it. Ports, yes, that's also an important infrastructure. Dams. So thank you so much for these responses. Let us go to the next question now. So this is yes and no questions. Are states always under an obligation to notify and consult with other riparian states when building infrastructure? Now we are jumping right into this question of international water law. The obligation to notify and consult with other riparian states is one of the key principles in the procedural norms. And I think if you may have watched some of the MOOC lectures on that you can see in the module 3, we talk very much about it. So, but then the question is it always under obligation to notify and consult with other riparian states when building the infrastructure? So now you see a very split answer. 60% of you said yes, it should be always an obligation. And then almost 40% of you said no. Perhaps that could mean not necessarily all the time. Sorry. In the current practices, there are different practices, and I think we will hear this from our speakers today. Excuse me. Let's go to the next question. So here, this is an open question. Please type in or vote any question that you would like to ask the panelists. So in today's session, you have already submitted some pre-set questions that you have submitted when you registered. So we'll be actually answering those questions in our panel discussion. But we would like to hear if you have come up with any additional questions while you're listening to the speakers. Please feel free to type in here. We will keep this poll open during the first part of this conversation. So as you hear questions pop up, please type in. And also, you can also just check this site, because if somebody types in a question that you think you also want to hear the answer, you can actually upvote. So then we will be looking at also the questions that has been voted more. So thank you so much. Now already we have some questions coming up. So please keep typing here the question. And now without further ado, I would like to introduce the two great event chairs today that we have. We're very happy to welcome two chairs for this session today who has been very much behind the scene in preparing the session and bringing us speakers. Professor Patricia Wouters, the founding director of the National Water Law Academy at Wuhan University, and Dr. David Dubrovnik, a lecturer at School of Law at Chongqing University. Next slide, please. Yes. So Professor Patricia Wouters is a founding director of Wuhan International Water Law Academy at the University of Wuhan, which is the key partner to actually organize this event. Professor Wouters has a close to 30 years experience in a wide range of international water law and transboundary water governance areas. And she has a wide range of experiences in this field, and also a founding director of the University Dundee UNESCO Centre for Water Law and Policy in Scotland. It's the first UNESCO Category 2 center in Scotland. Also has established China's International Water Law Group at the Xiamen Law School, where she was appointed as the Chinese Spouse and Talent Program. Please read this profile is on the website, so you can actually read more detail about her. But the most important here is the fun fact, of course. Patricia has a dual nationality. That is a fun fact. She's a Canadian and Belgian and lives mostly in Scotland and commuting to Wuhan. She's a very, very global person. Her biggest achievement in life is a healthy family. Then I would like to introduce Dr. David Devlomnik. He's a lecturer at the School of Law at the Chongqing University. Dr. Devlomnik is an emerging young scholar in the law of international water laws. He's completed bachelor degrees of philosophy and then moved on to the Masters of Philosophy, and then now completed the PhD in international law from Xiamen University, China. He's currently conducting teaching and research in international environmental law with a focus on law and international water courses. He has published in various international journals, and his monograph, Reciprocity and China's Transboundary Waters, the Law of International Water Courses, was recently published with Routledge. So congratulations for that. The fun fact, this is very important to know about him. So David is an adventurous eater, willing to try anything from sandworms to cicada, at least one. So that is very, very interesting. The biggest achievement in his life is after moving to China in 2014, he has now speaks Mandarin. So that's a real achievement, I must say, and I have heard him speaking in Chinese in live. So now without further ado, I would like to welcome Patricia and Dave to be to co-chair the next sessions. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yumiko. Thank you, GWP. It's exciting. It's wonderful to know, Yumiko, that you've already touched 2,000 participants from over 150 countries in the GWP MOOC. We're delighted to be here from Wuhan. I'm going to do a very quick introduction. I'd like to thank our spectacular speakers from around the globe who are going to talk about these issues today. Basically, when we looked at, and this was one of the topics, when we decided on the 6 topics, we took these from the poll Eve, responding to what participants wanted to hear more about. And there was a general interest in international water law and infrastructure. So the question at the heart of our discussion today is, what are the rules of international law that govern infrastructure development? And basically, they are, in terms of international law, there are sort of 3 broad areas, and we'll touch on 2 of these mostly today. There are the rules of international water law generally that apply, and that's sort of an umbrella over all of the infrastructure issues. And then we will look more particularly at the investment regulatory framework, which really combines several areas of international and national law. And broadly, we can't forget there are other areas of law, including multilateral environmental agreements and international human rights, and a vast area of other areas of law, which we won't touch on today. So next slide, please. When we looked at international water law and infrastructure, there are so many transboundary waters in the world, so many that don't have agreements in place. So we look, and there are so many different types of infrastructure. I started doing research on infrastructure. I found some very good PhD topics and scholarship, and there's a wide range. It's not always hydropower. It can be more than that, it can be weirs and different types of water development. But if you look around the world, and as Yumiko said, transboundary waters cover 153 nations, we have arrangements to look at through the lens of international law, and that's what we're going to do today. So if we could have the next slide. This is the lens through which we look at international water law and infrastructure. There are mostly the rules of international law that apply to transboundary waters. There are rules of customary law that apply to every state, regardless of whether there is a treaty or not. And those rules of customary law include these 4 main rules. There is an obligation to cooperate, a duty to cooperate, which includes finding peaceful means to settle any disputes that arise. There is each state, each transboundary watercourse state has a right and a duty to an equitable and reasonable use of the water. It's a use of the waters of transboundary waters. It's not an allocation of the waters. It's a use of the waters of transboundary waters. Very interesting in an infrastructure scenario. There is a due diligence obligation to prevent causing significant harm. This is something I go on about. Most people don't get it right. It's not a duty not to cause significant harm. It is a duty to take all reasonable measures not to cause significant harm. It's to prevent the causing of significant harm. So it's due diligence. And finally, on the procedural side, there is a duty to notify other states when you are undertaking plan measures. And looking at how that works in practice, one of the speakers will talk about that more today. I'm delighted to bring in the interface with international investment law. And really, when I was talking to Anna about this, infrastructure really introduces this investment regulatory framework that brings in not only international law, but transnational and national requirements. And we need to know the type of investor, the duties of the investor internationally and nationally, including duties of protection. So with that roundup, I'm going to pass over to Dave to introduce our speakers today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. Enjoy the session. We'll talk to you later.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants. Welcome. Thank you, Yumiko, for your excellent introduction, and thank you, Pat, for your great introduction to the topic. As you said, we have 3 panelists today, all from different backgrounds and different expertise who will discuss this interesting topic. Could we have the next slide, please? So our first speaker today is Dr. Anna Maria Daza. We'll then move on to Mr. Pera Ramoedi and Dr. Sokam Pech. Next slide, please. Anna Maria is a lecturer in international law at the School of Law in Edinburgh University in Scotland, where she has been since 2013, teaching and researching on international investment law and arbitration, international trade law, international water law, and natural resources management. She's written extensively on the intersection between investment law and many other areas of law, including environmental law and water law. She has also acted as counsel, expert, and consultant in international investment and arbitration disputes, has a PhD from the University of Dundee, and is a member of the Academic Forum for the Reform of Investor-State and Dispute Settlement. Her fun fact, her first hunger strike, a hunger strike, was at the age of 9 to pressure her parents to get a water storage tank so that she didn't have to get up at 5:30 in the morning to have a shower. This was in Cochabamba, Bolivia, and she notes that they did get the tank. And her biggest achievement is probably getting that tank, she says. Welcome, Anna. Next slide, please. Our second speaker is Mr. Pera Ramoedi, who is Executive Secretary of the Okavango River Basin Commission. Since 2018, he is based in Botswana, and after serving as Senior Program Officer in the Directorate of Infrastructure and Services Water Division of the Southern African Development Community Secretariat for over 21 years. He's responsible for coordination and facilitation of the implementation of the SADC program of action in the water sector. He has over 30 years experience and 24 years devoted to transboundary issues at the SADC level. His fun fact, he hails from a country with the highest lowest point in the world, Lesotho, also referred to as the kingdom in the sky, and his biggest achievement in life being part of and contributing to the promotion of water cooperation in the South African development community with its multiple shared watercourses and aquifers. Welcome, Pera. Next slide, please. And our final speaker is Dr. Sokam Pech, who is affiliate member of the International Water Law Academy, senior water and climate change consultant in Canada. He has a PhD degree in multidisciplinary sustainability science, focusing on transboundary rivers, Masters of International Law. He was formerly a senior official director general in Cambodia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he joined the Mekong River Commission in 2000 as an international water lawyer before being appointed as the director of the Mekong River Commission's Technical Support Division and Deputy CEO. His fun fact, as a world traveler and a global citizen, Sokam is delighted to has been delegated to virtual travel, teleworking, and online rendezvous by the invisible pandemic since early 2020. And his biggest achievement in life is that he is very happy that his ecological footprint has been reduced due to his fun fact. Welcome, Pech. So our first speaker today is Dr. Anna Maria Daza. Anna Maria, you have the floor. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. I cannot see the slides. Just 1 second. Now I can. Right. Can you hear me? Well, thank you very much to the organizers, first of all, for inviting me to this event. I'm very excited to join you today. I've been following all the other ones. And a warm hello for Chile, Scotland, to everyone. I'm going to focus on investment and transboundary water infrastructure and international law, because it's trying to cover quite a bit. Is going to be quite brief in each of the topics. So we're going to cover first international law and other legal frameworks. I'm going to briefly speak about the pulp mills case from the perspective of investors. And then I'm going to cover just briefly as well the protection of foreign investment and infrastructure projects and regulatory adaptability of states. Next, please. So as Pat mentioned earlier, when we think about infrastructure and investment, we have to think about a huge range of areas of law, different dynamics and relationships. So if we start, for instance, from the top, we have international law in general, but our umbrella, at least for the sake of this talk, is international water law and substantive and procedural obligations. We also have, though, international investment law and international human rights law that are, intimately linked to the development of infrastructure. Now, all these obligations at the international level will then be implemented, enforced, and monitored at the domestic level. What we need for that? Generally, clear policy on the infrastructure to be developed, adaptable water and environmental regulations, so that investors know what they can expect and what the rules of the game are. Now, if you move to the transnational principles and guidelines, you will see also that investors will have certain soft law obligations, given, for instance, by the business and human rights guidelines, guidelines on anti-corruption, SDGs. The OECD, for instance, developed lots of guidelines for investors. And there is a nice relationship dynamic here with national law in the development of good practices, transparency, community participation, stakeholder investment, to make sure that these infrastructure projects are legitimate to those that are going to benefit from them, but are also legitimate between the two countries that are sharing the resource. Next, please. So a brief introduction to the pulp mills from the perspective of investors. As you all probably know, and much better than myself probably, around 2005-2006, Argentina challenged a project by Uruguay to implement and build 2 pulp mills. These pulp mills were to be built very close to the border with Argentina, and Argentina was obviously concerned about the quality of the waters, but also for the procedural obligations that Uruguay owed to Argentina under the 1975 statute of the Uruguay River. Now, the International Court of Justice found that effectively Uruguay had breached procedural obligations under Article 7 to 12 of the 1975 statute because it didn't comply with the obligations to notify, to inform, and to negotiate with Argentina. Now, I would ask the question, what would have happened if Uruguay lost the case, if the ICJ would have ordered Uruguay to suspend the work or to cancel these infrastructure projects, what would have happened? So with the perspective of the investor here comes in the sense that we have a Spanish investor and a Finnish investor that had certain expectations to be able to build this infrastructure. Now, the state of Uruguay had already issued licenses to build, licenses to operate. The Spanish investor, ENCE, decided to stop the project and left the country just before building it. The Finnish investor, on the other hand, did build the Bodnia mill and continued to operate it, and is operating now. I think they are also building a new one, or planning to build a new one. So this is the expectation. The investors would have been very scared at the time by these actions, but this dispute between Uruguay and Argentina. Next, please. So what would have been the remedies under international investment law? Very briefly, an international investment agreement is an international treaty agreed by two states under which each state promised the other to protect and promote each other's investors and investments, with a very particular dispute settlement mechanism, that is investor-state arbitration, under which the state consents to arbitration. That is, the investor could sue the state under arbitration directly. Now, a typical international investment agreement will have very many, sorry, I just wouldn't see the slide. Standards of protection like non-discrimination, non-expropriation without compensation, and fair and equitable treatment, and the dispute settlement, of course, mechanism. Now, let's talk about the fair and equitable treatment very briefly. Shall we? Next slide, please. The fair and equitable treatment standard is a standard owed to investors by states, under which, well, as you can say, fair and equitable. What does this mean? Most arbitral tribunals have interpreted this standard as the obligation of the state to be transparent, consistent, predictable, respect legitimate expectation of investors. Now, questions will come. What are legitimate expectations, and how legitimate they are when the state needs to adapt to agree on new rules, to implement adaptable management of water, for instance. We will also see that under this standard, for instance, public-private partnerships, joint ventures, or individual investors will have a very dynamic relationship with the government and government agencies in order to be able to have the binding, the tendering, the application of the renewal of licenses, or the terminations of the contract. So if we go back to our case study, that is the pulp mills, you will understand that there would have been a lot of relationship between the investors, the Spanish investors and the Finnish investors, with CARU, with Uruguay, in the issuance of these licenses. If by any chance the investors could not have gone on with this infrastructure, they probably would have had a remedy under the investment agreement, and may have been a remedy for breaching these legitimate expectations or breaching these promises to build the two pulp mills. So this is as much as I will go right now with investment. Can we please move so I can conclude? Thank you. So I go back to my original three bubbles, just to say that how important the obligations under water international law are, the enforcement of them, and implementation under national law, and how clear they should be so that we avoid this breaching promises under international investment law. Now, international investment law is just one of the examples, because you also have obligations under human rights law, customary international law that are related to the building of infrastructure. With that, I conclude. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that great intervention. Our next speaker is Pera Ramawedi. Pera, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dave, and thank you, colleagues, for being here to listen to us. I will be giving you an expose of the experience we have in the Southern African region, specifically in the Okavango River Basin space. Next slide. I think you should be aware that the basin is one of the most unique basins which is still free-flowing and relatively pristine. And it is one of those that is shared by the three countries in Southern Africa, Botswana, Angola, and Namibia. 95% of the flow in this basin is originating in the highlands in Angola, and therefore is utilized across the basin, but mostly within the Botswana territory in the delta, which supports a number of ecosystems. Transboundary infrastructure in the region is guided legally by the SADC protocol on general causes, specifically and in particular for the Okavango, the OCACOM consultations, notifications, and negotiations guideline of 2019, which sets up rules and assists the member states in developing and agreeing around development in the basin. The protocol addresses mandatory notifications and planned measures, and with the objective of trying to assist countries to hold the potential to avoid significant adverse effects of their activities. Next slide.
If you could please switch on your camera, please, so we can see your face.
Oh.
Thank you.
Am I visible now? Thank you. Yes, I was saying now the notification guidelines that we have developed to try and implement the protocol provisions, including the provisions in our OCACOM agreement, which fortunately at this point we are reviewing to strengthen it so that it can be able to address issues even around this issue of infrastructure development. They give us a scope of its application. The guidelines also identify different levels and scales of the implementation of the guidelines. It gives clear allocation of roles and responsibilities to those who need to take action in relation to planned measures. The overarching purpose of these guidelines are to ensure that there's a common understanding between the member states on steps necessary to undertake for cooperative implementation of the protocol provisions. It also finally defines and gives guidance on notification, consultation, negotiations, including conflict resolutions in case where disputes as a result of some of these planned activities would take place. Next slide. Now, as a region and as a basin commission, we undertook an assessment of the multi-sector investment opportunity in the basin, which was to make sure that we look at sustainable, equitable, climate resilient investment program that we can develop for the three member states. The idea being collective and cooperative arrangements or cooperative action on the basin. And this study made a scientific analysis, economic, hydrological, environmental modeling that was used to arrive at decisions of what programs we can propose. For the success of the program, it was basically calling for joint action at the basin level. About 10 development scenarios were discussed and were developed and then subsequently discussed to arrive at what would be the most applicable investment or applicable programs that can be implemented, because the basin is quite a sensitive one that needs careful approach to how we are doing our development. It also looked at the productive conjunctive use of water for hydropower, irrigation, and urban growth, which will also emphasize the issue of improving livelihoods of the communities that subsist in the basin. Higher level of abstraction would therefore require that we balance the scale and cost with the resulting environmental impact, especially that would affect the delta, which is a sensitive ecological system in the basin. Therefore, based on this study, three program areas were recommended: livelihood enhancements, which would be building on existing short-term interventions, tourism investment framework, and of course, cooperative infrastructure development, which was mostly going to be carried out in the upper echelons of the basin in the highlands in Angola. Next slide. Now, we thought it was important also to develop a financing mechanism to support activities within the basin, particularly to look at issues of funding the primary focus of the long-term management strategy of the COP, creating coordinated response to threats in the basin, providing sustainable financial resources to fund threats and mitigating around those threats, and to create a platform to optimize benefit sharing across the basin. Now, this has been established as a company limited by guarantee in Botswana, and we are currently at the stage of operationalizing it through establishing its governance structure, doing marketing and resource mobilization. It will be a hybrid type of an of a fund that will look at sinking and endowment funds that would come from well-wishers and funders, as the case may be. Next slide. Now, as an example, this is the current structure or the governance structure of this fund. It has about 5 members, 3 of which will be coming from and representing the 3 member states of Angola, Botswana, and Namibia. And they also in turn appoint directors to sit in the board of directors from the 3 countries, but these are also supported by 4 independent non-executive directors at the board. And as you can see, it's 3 against 4. It's good governance that was practiced to make sure that decisions are not overly directed or rather influenced mainly by government, but that the independent directors can also guide implementation of this process. Next slide. And I hope it's probably the final slide. Now, this is what we have undertaken to assess what will be the benefits and impact on investment to attract those who will be willing to fund this. And this is looking at various characteristics or categories of benefits, which will include health, livelihoods, climate, and ecosystems. And you can see in the table there that livelihoods take the bigger portion of the impacts that we want to address by this fund. And of course, these are the figures that have been estimated and modeled. And the impact is shown there that, for instance, for every dollar invested, we are hoping to get, or we have projected to get $7.6 or even more in terms of cost-benefit ratio. I think this sets out the process in the Okavango River Basin, and I would like to stop here and hopefully we'll get questions that will assist us to learn more about the activities in the basin. Thank you very much. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Para, for sharing your vast experience with us and with the audience. Our next speaker is Sokam Pech. Sokam, the floor is yours. Please turn on your camera.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. Allow me to spend the next 5 minutes to speak about the case of prior consultation under the 95 Mekong Agreement. It is the first mainstream dam in the lower Mekong, and a lot of the thing to learn from. Just next slide, please. Just for background, the cooperation in the lower Mekong among the 4 countries, without Myanmar and China, started in 1957, and the last agreement was signed in 1995. It was negotiated during the this new paradigm of sustainable development. It is a framework agreement and just provide some key principles and also mechanism for negotiating, monitoring, reporting, and regular governance meeting. Next one, please. The 95 Mekong Agreement negotiated during the Sustainable Development New Paradigm. But after a few years of the 95 Mekong Agreement was signed, and then we realized that the hydropower dam that had been on the shelf for a while during the war in this part of the world, now being actively reopened, and hydropower dam built in the upper reach in China or in Laos, in other places. So we actually was like had to catch up with the new development. The 95 Mekong Agreement itself, we can see some evaluators consider it as a good organization with this rather strong agreement, even though it is a framework agreement, but have some success in agreement among the country, even though they are sometimes disagree on a lot of things, but they have this thing to keep on working together. So there was a kind of agreement on key substantive procedure like cooperation, the duty to cooperate, duty to obligation and right to equitable, reasonable use, and also the duty to prevent significant harms to your co-riparian countries, and also some procedural rules. And yeah, it had been written in that agreement, but in implementation, the country tend to select some rules or provision that more close to their interests. Like if I want to develop the dam infrastructure, I would refer to the Article 3 or 2 about the sovereignty and territorial integrity, and the country that suffering would always refer to compensation or responsibility for damage. So this is the way how the 95 Mekong Agreement had been designed. You have no right to prevent other country from development, but no country had a unilateral right to cause significant harm to their neighbors. Next slide, please. Several more clicks, Lisa. Yes, this is a 95 Mekong Agreement. It's now several years later. It has been added by more and more rules, or sometimes we call it as sub-agreement, that try to add more technical and procedural rules so that the country can actually implement the 95 Mekong Agreement. But at the same time, they have to build and develop the knowledge base, the modeling tool, because transboundary water agreement is very highly technical thing. Sometimes lawyer doesn't have all the understanding, the technical understanding to actually implement or execute the agreement. That's why I believe this technical procedure or sub-agreement to the water engineer, to the modelers, to the social scientists to work on that. So it had in terms of address technical uncertainty and some scientific uncertainty that we had to deal with. Next one, please. Now let me come to Lisa, next slide. Let me come to the first private consultation. Let's look at what do we mean by PCA on the left-hand side. It is about obligation to notify if the development happen in tributaries, in wet season, So you notify with a simple notification that we are going to build this and that here and there. This is the feasibility study report that we want to share with you. And you have 6 months or 3 months to consider if you have any question and please ask. And for other development that happen on the mainstream, like diversion of water from mainstream to outside of the basin, or to build like dams, hydropower dams on the mainstream, that will require prior consultation. It is more complicated than just notification. It means that you provide notification and then with a lot of more information and allow your neighbors more time to access the impact on the river basin, on the flow of the rivers and on their neighbors. And that doesn't mean that they try to very hard to negotiate, notify, negotiate, and try their best to reach an agreement. And the case will show later if the agreement has been reached or not. And specific agreement obligation is very rare. We never had that kind of case yet. It is about diversion of water from the mainstream to outside of the basin. So Sayaburi Dam is the first dam on the Lower Mekong part. It is a big one. It's funded by Thai banks. 98% of electricity is sold now to Thailand. The dam already started operation last year. It is very time consuming, a lot of contestation, not only by the civil society, but also by downstream member countries. But after the end of 6 months of prior consultation, this project move ahead and raise a lot of questions about what is the country, the state responsibility if they start to move ahead with the dams project without the agreement or consensus among all member countries. So next slide, please. That will be something you can.
Could you please conclude? We're just running a bit over time. Thank you.
Yeah, and our conclusion. I think there's some good appreciation of the 95 Mekong agreement by some experts, but a lot of criticism by other, by civil society and also academia as well. So there's still a lot of room for improvement. After now 6 or 7 prior consultation, a lot of study have been conducted. Some information were generated, scientific information. But as we already know that international cooperation is important, especially on this transboundary river. And the problem for international relation is that you cannot you can only move as fast as the most reluctant member because they are sovereign states. So if you want to enforce it, it's not like in the domestic legal system or law. So this is my rather pessimistic conclusion, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sokam. Thank you very much, Anna Maria and Farah and Sokam for those very rich presentations. We have so many questions. We have some live questions coming in, but what I'm going to propose is, because of the time, I'm going to put 3 questions, 1 to each of you. I'm going to try to consolidate the questions. I'll give all 3 questions now, and then give each of the speakers, a minute or 2 to respond. So I'll just read out the questions. First to Anna Maria, and then I'll list all the questions, and then each of you can have a shot. Anna Maria, how do the rules of international water law and international investment law interface with respect to hydropower infrastructure? So that's your question. We'd like a little bit of response to. Para, I've got a couple of things I'm going to consolidate. Dave's been sending me live questions from the group. So yours is really, Para, to what extent is existing international water law effective for emerging infrastructure needs due to climate change variability? And the other question is how transboundary water infrastructures contribute to climate change resilience. You talked about sort of a pristine area. So that could be your question. How do you feel the Okavango is going to use infrastructure to deal with climate change resilience? And so, Kim, you've got what should states do when the consultation process doesn't necessarily reach a conclusion that all states are satisfied with? And then and then I'll add this live question from the poll now. How do you facilitate the agreement among riparian countries on what can be done and what cannot be done? What can states do during the consultation process? Okay, over to Anna Maria, and then we'll have Para, and then we'll have Sokam. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I think in the context of hydropower, we have to think of a very big infrastructure project, a lot of expropriation around because you need to clear the site. You will have to move communities. You will be building dams. So I think there is a lot to think about in terms of the areas of international law that I have mentioned. Now, I would say that the relationship between international water law and investment law in this case would be the implementation of the rules and the compliance of the rules. So it can be, I would think that there could be a positive relationship and also a negative relation if things go wrong. The positive relationship would be that states might be inspired to implement the rules of water, international water law in the national legal system. So investors really adopt proper environmental impact assessments, engage with the communities properly so that secure the investment. One of the biggest problems that I have seen, for instance, in the context of mining, is that there have been a lot of criticism and concern about the communities downstream about the use of the water upstream. And this can happen in a transboundary context as well. They have pushed so much governments that at some point governments have to finish these licenses, which in the end, as I said before, would affect the expectations of investors. I don't know if this answers the question shortly.
Thanks, Anna Maria, that helps. And I think each of the speakers are going to have a lot of questions in the breakout group. So thanks very much. We have to move on. Para, what do you say? Whoops, you are still muted. You have to put on your mic. Okay, here we go.
Now here you can hear. No, look, I think the question is very important, and I think the legal structure that we have currently in the region and in the basin in particular does offer some support to guide against potential adverse impacts while addressing the needs, which obviously will be as a result of having, for instance, storage to avert potential adverse impacts in case we have either floods or droughts, which are a commonplace in the region. Now, the most important thing is that this international water law does regulate against how these are carried out in the basin. For instance, the guideline will guide you on what consultation you have to make and at what level and what things you can do. We have actually been talking about, for instance, in the basin, the concept of a development space. That is to ensure that whatever we do does not adversely affect the system integrity in the worst of ways, but while we still know that investment is an important element. Now, I think this is probably answering the two questions. That what we have obviously is that in the region, we have the ground rules to guide us on how to do and how to mitigate in case something wrong were to happen.
Thank you very much. I have so many questions for each of the speakers, but we have to limit it. So Kim, thank you, Para. That was great. So Kim, what do you say to your answer? And then if I could tell all of the participants, Dave keeps sending me questions live. So when we go into the breakout groups, which we'll do in about 3 minutes, ask all your questions there. That's the best we can do. We'll just have the one round of questions for now so that you can deal with your participation in your group. So Kim, sorry about that. Thank you.
Yes, the question is about what state can do if they cannot reach a conclusion of this prior consultation. This case exactly the case when after 6 months of prior consultation and the country could not agree. Like downstream country like Cambodia, Vietnam want to extend it, want to defer the project for 10 years so that they can have more studies, more understanding about the impacts. But now government argue that they already agree with the funding banks and they already have some financial obligation to deliver. And they also have the right to develop it on them and they want to ensure that there's no impact. And at the end, there was more discussion at the minister level among the 4 countries. And then some donor coming in like Japan, they want to have it, the council study. And then Laos government said that they will do modification to the dam design. They will have dam design, what they call environmental friendly dam design and fish-friendly turbine design. So they will invest million and million dollars more to do this mitigation. So there's this kind of, and then Prime Minister of Laos, Cambodia meet bilaterally agree on some other benefit sharing arrangement like selling electricity to Cambodia, this kind of the discussion. So it's open up, they could not agree, but as some experts say, Mekong cooperation survived 67 years, 63 years because of the Mekong spirit. A very abstract concept, but country try to work around this win-win solution, either through the Mekong River Commission or bilaterally. And that I think that is answer to the question, I hope.
Well, thank you. Thanks to the speakers. I'm going to hand over to Yumiko to sort of, I think that's all, those are all of the questions. I've got so many questions. Dave sent me a whole list of more questions. So in the breakout groups, I'm certain that these speakers will have a lot of questions. So thank you very much for that interactive session. I loved all the presentations. I have so many questions for you myself. Yumiko, over to you with thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation and the rounds of panel discussions. I know the time is moving very fast, but don't worry. Now is the most exciting part of this session is the breakout session, where actually you can go and ask your questions directly to the panelists. And this is, we are trying to simulate the situation. If you have a face-to-face conference after the session is over, you can actually go up and speak directly to the speakers. So we are trying to replicate this in a virtual setting. And I think it's worked quite well. So there are 4 groups of topics. The group 1 in the breakout, we will have Ana Maria, together with Barbara Janas Pauleta, who is from GW Technical Committee member and also from the German Kazakh University. Group 2, we will have Vera Ramoeli and Alistair Ricklack, who is from the Northumbria University and also has been the on the MOOC coordinator, module coordinator. Group number 3 will be Sokam Pech and Dave Devlemonik would be in this group. And then group 4, if you have any questions about the MOOC in general or international water law, you can come and talk to Professor Patricia Wooders and myself. And this time around, we also created a new group which will be the group who will stay in this main plenary session. For those of you, because we have heard some people who just want to talk to each other or just chill and socialize with each other. So if you want to do that, then please stay in this main room. Now you can, on your screen, you will see now the breakout options. On the screen now you can see, I think if you click, yes, if you click this breakout icon, then you see a list of the breakout sessions, and then you can actually click join to join the room that you want to join. And if you don't know how to join, then please type into the chat which group you want to join, the group 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Then our technical host will send you to that group. So I see already people start to jump into the different breakout groups. So feel free to just jump into the group that you want. Yes, I see some people typing into the chat now. Group 3. Yes. Yes, I see now people are starting to join the group. So please, we have in the next 20 minutes in this group to discuss and answer any questions that you would like to be answered. This is great. Please keep joining, and I will now jump into my breakout. I still see a lot of people still in the plenary. So, feel free to stay here, but please take advantage of getting into the groups. Okay, so enjoy. Yes, we are all back. I see still, okay. Still some of the breakout rooms are still open, or is it all closed?
Yeah, we are all in the main room now, Yumiko.
Okay.
Continue.
That's great.
It's just been closed out, yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. I know some of our conversation must have been just cut off in the middle of it. Apologies for that, but we were just had a very lively breakout session. So let's hear from each of the sessions how it was, and also each speakers to also say some final words and along with that. So I would like to ask perhaps Ana Maria just to give us a final reflection on how also the discussion went.
I think it was a very interesting discussion, lots of questions, and thank you very much, Barbara, for co-chairing that session. There is a lot of concern, I think, and a lot of questions regarding the relationship between international water law and domestic law. How do we implement these obligations? A lot of questions how obligations can be applied generally to different investments, and I think the answer is there is no such thing. We have to consider the specifics and the context of each of the projects.
Thank you very much, Anna. We'd like to hear from Farah.
Yes, thank you. Our group was equally very active, and a lot of questions were raised, covering obviously the obvious reasons, the obvious issues around cost-benefit analysis, cost-benefit sharing along River Basin Organization, authority of organizations established, including but not limited to some of the practical things such as data sharing, if they are regulated or otherwise. And of course, I think we enjoyed the group. Obviously, as usual, time was limited. I was cut off in the process of answering one of the last questions, but that said is the part of the process. And I think I was happy to be part of this and contribute to this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Farah, for that reflection. Let's hear from Sokam.
Yes, the discussion was very rich. 4 or 5 questions have been raised, starting from how we can ensure that all riparian countries will benefit from equitable and reasonable use. Maybe one country aggressively develop their their project and then would preempt other countries to enjoy their fair share of these transboundary rivers. And also a lot the discussion around what are the biggest threat to the transboundary river: infrastructure, water diversion, or the climate change. Yes, this is very interesting in terms of, and for my answer, I say that, yeah, from our study, the infrastructure and water diversion and dam regulation are the biggest threat. And then climate change, climate variability and climate change, long-term one, will create more uncertainty in the coming years. And also ask a question about the role of financier and the role of development partner and donors in these transboundary rivers as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sokam, for that. And we had a new attempt to have the social rooms here. So let's hear from Tobias. How did it go?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun in our little social room. We had a small quiz going on, a small competition with a lot of participants joining in. And we also have a winner. I think we don't know who it is, but somebody paid really good attention to the presentations. The quiz questions were a little bit about the presentations. And we also gave everyone the opportunity to just say something and promote what he or she's working on. So the winner was guest 176, whoever that is. So yeah, it was going well and it was a fun exercise, and we hope to continue doing this in the next session as well.
That's great. Thank you so much. And the guest 176, feel free to say your names or type in your names so we can all congratulate you for the best answers. So finally, Patricia, please, we had a nice, very lively group. How did it go?
We had
your perspective.
Yes, we had a very lively group from all over, from Brazil and China and Europe. I think the general questions are still, how does international water law work? What are the principles? How are they applied? What is compliance about? What is the value of the UN Watercourses Convention? And I think one of the interesting things that came out was that there are regional differences in how international law applies to transboundary waters. And it's always a quest for cooperation, but we are making it. We had great questions, very animated group. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody, but thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Yumiko.
Thank you so much for that. So with that, we are coming to the final conclusion of this event. We would like to now take some bit of time for everyone to reflect on today's session together. And for that, please go to Pulp again, the pulp.com/GWP on your browser. Please, yes, now Tobias has typed in this link to that. And if you go to this, there are several questions. And now you can see the 5 questions that you can see on this survey. And perhaps we can just, as I speak, you can type in your answers. So we could actually conclude this during the session or while also a little bit, we will keep this open a little bit later afterwards the session. First question, what have you learned from today's session? You heard so many things, but it's good for you to reflect a little bit. What did you learn? What was the important lessons that you heard from the speakers or other people's peer colleagues? We'd love to hear that. Second question is, in planning for our next sessions, which topics would you like to see covered in the future event? You might have thought about some new important aspect on transboundary water governance. Please tell us what you would like to see coming up in the future event. So please type in your answer here. Now, the third question is, would you like to engage with other learners and participants beyond this event or the MOOC? Now, we asked this question to you because we have heard from many of you, this session and this series has been very, very engaging, and people want more time, but we cannot have a too long session, so we have to keep a bit of a restriction. There's only 1.5 hours during this session, and also in our survey through the MOOC, we are hearing from people that you want to interact with each other, beyond these live sessions. We do have the MOOC discussion forum. We also try the mirror, but we really want to know whether it is a need for us to actually provide some avenues for you to engage with the other learners. So this is just a simple yes and no question. Please answer here if you feel it's a need for you or not. And then the fourth question follows on that. What kind of engagement would be most beneficial for you? We would like to know what is it that you want to actually share or you want to engage with. And here we have listed some potential answers. Maybe you want to know the job opportunities or knowledge sharing. And now my colleague is showing on the screen, you can actually prioritize this, which ones are more important for you and not. And then you can confirm the ranking. And if you have other needs other than what we have listed here, then you can go to the next question and then other suggestions on kinds of engagement you're looking for. So here on the number 5, please type in freely what is it that you're looking for. So when you answered all of this, then please click submit the survey at the bottom of the screen. Then hopefully we will get some information and feedback from you. So as I said, you can take your time. If you finished already, please submit it now. But we will keep this open for a little while after the event, so you can continue typing. I don't know how long we can actually keep it open for. Maybe like next hour or so, perhaps. So yes, please type in. I don't know, Lisa, if you already seen some answers coming up that we could share on the screen, or otherwise we could just, yes, Lisa is sharing the screen. Yes, so what have you learned in today's session? People have said already the importance of negotiation, yes, and regional experience, infrastructure on transboundary. People have learned about Okavango River. Thank you very much to Farah for that. Yes, so now we see more coming in. Most agreements already in place are going for a stage regarding the mainstream different scales of issues such as laws and regulations of financing. Law is good, international water law. I'm sure that is what our lawyers would like to hear from the feedback. So I think it's good that everyone realize that law can actually provide a framework for the countries and people to actually negotiate or to manage these rivers. And then when building the infrastructure, when it comes to nitty-gritty, the law can give the framework. So thank you so much for that. And that's also why it's good that we've having this series of sessions with focus on international water law. If you, Lisa, do you see any answers to the next questions that you could share? Yeah, which topics people would like to see, the emerging research areas, international water law and transboundary water conflict, more case studies. Yes, thank you very much for that. So we will try to integrate more case studies in the coming sessions. Needs of transboundary law and sediment flow, how to properly use water law on conflict resolution and transboundary cases. And please do look at the MOOC case studies that we have on our MOOC, the participation and decision making, that's really important. Policies for projects. How other groups like the youth, women, indigenous communities included in transboundary water processing, that is really also important issues, and let's take that on in this part of the stakeholder engagement. So water diplomacy and peace building, that's also coming up, and people want to see more international water law. Thank you so much for that. Lisa, I don't know if you see any answers for the following ones that we could share. Would you like to engage? That's really great to see. 96% says yes, you would like to engage with other learners beyond this event or the MOOC. So let's see what the next question. I don't know if we already have some results for the next question. Lisa, if you could check that. What kind of engagement would you like to see more? Knowledge sharing that comes on the top, showcasing the case studies, networking, getting the job opportunities and information about it. So that's really great to hear this ranking. And then Are there any others that is coming in the next? Thank you very much. Congrats. Congratulating all of us. Social platform to share knowledge and contacts. Continuing these sessions. Okay, so that's a good message to hear that people are interested in the live sessions. Networking, exploration of software technological tools related to IWL. Thematic subgroups interact more meaningfully. Thank you very much for that. Special topic live events. The problem solution types of showcase. That will be very practical and really helpful to share. So that's an interesting suggestion to create a participate in regional and global issues. The longer time, yes, thank you very much. So we will think about that possibilities, sharing the MOOC experiences, new knowledges, training opportunities, more international water law, transboundary agreements, a workshop to devote on how power impacts process. So thank you. These are very, very useful information for us in moving this forward. So thank you very much for this input, and please keep responding if you have not submitted your survey. And now with this, I would like to conclude today's session. Thank you by thanking all of you for participating, and thank all the speakers. We had a great speakers, Anna Maria Vera and Sokim, and two great co-chairs, Patricia and Dave. Thank you so much for excellent organization, and of course the GWP team who has been very much behind the scene to organize today's session. And I would like to next slide, please. The next slide, please. The next session will be on the last session of this IWR series that we have planned so far, is international water law and groundwater. So that's coming up on the 15th of June. The time will be a little bit later in the day since we have a guest speaker also coming from South America. So also we try to shift the time. It's very difficult to find the best time for everyone. The last session before the summer break will be on the groundwater. So please stay tuned, and you're all welcome to sign up. So thank you so much for this. And I would like to also thank our co-organizing Wuhan International Water Law Academy for always being excellent co-host for this. And of course, the other module coordinators who also joined us today, Dr. Alistair Clark and Dr. Barbara Janus Pauletta. Thank you so much for your support. So thank you, everyone. And before we say goodbye, I would like to invite all of you to open your video so we can take our group photos. Please note that this group photo we may be using for our promotional materials and so on. So if you prefer not to be on the promotional materials, please feel free to switch off your camera. But it is great to see everyone here face to face, and we see some familiar faces, the previous speakers coming. I see Peter here, Kovac. Thank you so much for joining us. So yes, now maybe we can all wave to each other. And while we take photos and give a big smile. Thank you very much. Very nice to see everyone smiling. Mario, let us know once it's done.
We are done. Thanks.
Okay,
Yumiko.
that's so great. So with that, I would like to conclude today's session. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in the next session. And also, don't forget, please stay tuned. Feel free to also type in any more questions or comments into the MOOC discussion forum. You're very welcome to do so. Thank you very much to everyone, and see you next time. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Yumiko. Thanks, speakers. Thanks, GWP. Bye. See you next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, bye. Thank you, bye. Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Yes.